The alert flashed across the screens of every fleet in the sector. Alert, human war vessel enters the sector. The words were simple enough, yet they carried with them an electric charge, a pulse that reverberated through the entire galaxy. In a universe where power and might were the measures by which civilizations were judged, humanity had been a relatively recent player, a species that had risen from obscurity to become one of the most feared forces in existence. The news of their arrival, once considered an anomaly, was now a harbinger of something more ominous, a shift in the balance of galactic power. The ship that had entered the sector was not just any vessel. It was the USS Intrepid, a massive warship, a symbol of human ingenuity and relentless drive. It was one of the few ships of its kind, built with technologies that were equal parts advanced and brutal. Its massive hull gleamed in the cold light of space, but its true power lay beneath the surface, an arsenal of weapons designed not just to kill, but to dominate, to reshape the very laws of warfare. It was a ship capable of turning the tide in any conflict, and as it made its approach into the heart of a contested sector, every eye in the galaxy turned toward it. For the past few decades, humanity had been climbing rapidly up the ranks of galactic influence. The once insular species, confined to their small corner of the Milky Way, had made waves when they first encountered the larger, more established galactic powers. But unlike many species, who sought peaceful coexistence or diplomacy, humanity had made its mark with sheer force of will and the unmatched lethality of its military. The galaxy was not unfamiliar with war. In fact, the idea of conflict had been woven into the fabric of galactic politics for millennia. Civilizations had risen, fallen, and evolved on the backs of warfare. But the human approach to war was different, not just in its brutal efficiency, but in its unwavering resolve. The galaxy's established powers had long relied on complex diplomacy, subtle negotiations, and trade agreements to maintain their positions. Humanity, on the other hand, was direct. They didn't care for the intricacies of political maneuvering. They sought to impose their will through force, if necessary, and when it was necessary, they never hesitated. This made them a unique force in the galaxy, one whose arrival in any sector was never met with indifference. As the Intrepid made its way through the sector, the response from the various galactic factions was immediate and calculated. The Coriath Collective, a race known for their telepathic prowess and their ability to form vast psychic networks, convened in their High Council chambers. They had been among the first to recognize the potential danger humanity posed, and though they were many times older than humanity, they were not immune to fear. The network buzzed with unease as they pondered what the appearance of a human warship in their space meant. The Orthians, a massive insectoid species known for their hive mind-like unity, sent scouts to track the vessel. They were not afraid, but they were curious. The Orthians had been wary of humanity's expansion ever since their first encounter with a human fleet years ago. The humans had fought them back with an aggression they had not expected, and while their initial defeat had been humiliating, the Orthians had learned quickly. They now kept a close eye on human movements, aware that one wrong step could result in another violent conflict. Elsewhere, the Vedral Consortium, an alliance of trade-fueled species who thrived on commerce and diplomacy, grew concerned. The human economy was one of the most robust in the galaxy, and the Intrepid's arrival was likely a signal that humanity was about to expand into their territory. As the consortium's members deliberated, they couldn't help but acknowledge the pragmatism of humanity's approach. They were a species that didn't wait for the future to come to them, they seized it, and in doing so, they had managed to build a massive empire in a fraction of the time it took their peers to do the same. The Intrepid wasn't the only ship in humanity's fleet, but it was one of the most notable. Its crew, handpicked from the best and brightest of humanity's military, was unparalleled in their skill. The captain, Alexander Drake, was a seasoned veteran, known for his calm under pressure and his ruthlessness when necessary. His career had been defined by a series of successful campaigns, each one more impressive than the last. Now, at the helm of the Intrepid, he was tasked with a mission that was as much about psychological warfare as it was about tactical precision. Humanity's presence in the sector was meant to send a message that the old powers could no longer hold sway over the galaxy, that a new order was on the horizon, and humanity would be at the forefront of it. The ship was outfitted with cutting-edge technology that the galaxy had never seen before. Its weapon systems were designed to overwhelm even the most advanced defenses. It possessed phase disruptors, which could tear through shields and matter alike, rendering enemy vessels useless before they even had a chance to retaliate. Its energy cannons were capable of disintegrating entire fleets with a single, concentrated blast. And, perhaps most terrifying of all, the Intrepid possessed a prototype drive that could manipulate gravity, allowing it to perform maneuvers that defied the conventional understanding of space travel. But the true strength of the Intrepid lay in its crew. They were not merely soldiers, they were the finest warriors the galaxy had ever seen. Every member of the crew had been selected for their ability to think on their feet, to adapt, and to strike without hesitation. They were a collective of humanity's best and brightest, brought together for a singular purpose: to dominate, to show the galaxy that humanity was no longer a mere bystander in galactic affairs, but a force to be reckoned with. As the Intrepid entered the sector, its sensors began to pick up multiple signatures. The first to arrive were a flotilla of warships from the Coriath Collective, their psychic minds already trying to probe the human vessel to understand its purpose. But the Intrepid was prepared. Their psychic defenses, developed after years of human conflict with telepathic species, blocked the Coriath's attempts at infiltration. The Collective's vessels, although powerful, were not enough to break the mental barriers the humans had erected. The Coriath fleet was forced to stay back, hesitant and unsure of how to proceed. Next came a contingent of Orthian ships, their massive, insectoid forms darting through the void with terrifying precision. They were formidable warriors, their hive mind coordinating each maneuver with deadly efficiency. However, they were also cautious. The defeat they had suffered at humanity's hands was still fresh in their collective memory, and they knew better than to underestimate the human war machine. The Orthian fleet hung just out of range, watching, waiting for a sign of intent. The Vedral Consortium, ever the opportunists, sent a diplomatic envoy to meet with the Intrepid's crew. The message was clear: they wanted to negotiate, to discuss trade, to open dialogue. The Consortium was not interested in conflict, but they were not fools either. They understood that humanity's rise had disrupted the status quo, and it was better to be on the side of the new power than to risk angering them. Captain Drake stood at the bridge of the Intrepid, his eyes scanning the viewscreen as the various alien fleets assembled around him. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was a critical point in human history. The Intrepid's presence in the sector was not just about asserting dominance, it was about ensuring humanity's future. He knew that the galaxy would not bend to humanity's will without resistance, but he was prepared to meet that resistance head-on. "Captain," said Lieutenant Sarah Ramirez, the ship's communications officer, "the Coriath fleet is making a move. They've raised their shields and are preparing to engage." Drake's voice was calm, almost eerily so. "Maintain course. Inform the fleet that we'll be engaging them in 10 seconds. Ramirez blinked, slightly taken aback by the captain's nonchalant tone. "Sir, they outnumber us 3-1. Drake smiled, a glint of fierce determination in his eyes. "I'm counting on it." The Intrepid surged forward, its massive engines roaring to life as it cut through the space around it. The Coriath ships fired their opening salvo, powerful energy beams streaking toward the human warship. But the Intrepid's shields absorbed the blasts with ease. The vessel's superior technology, combined with its unmatched maneuverability, allowed it to weave through the Coriath attack like a predator evading its prey. Then, in a move that caught the Coriath off guard, the Intrepid unleashed its own barrage of energy blasts, ripping through the Coriath fleet with precision. The Coriath ships were no match for the Intrepid's superior firepower. One by one, they were disabled, their shields overwhelmed, their hulls breached. The Coriath Collective, usually so sure of its psychic superiority, was stunned into silence as their fleet was torn apart before their very eyes. In the midst of the battle, the Orthians hesitated. They had witnessed the sheer might of the Intrepid, and for the first time, they questioned their ability to confront humanity in open conflict. Meanwhile, the Vedral Consortium, though still eager to negotiate, found their diplomatic channels growing increasingly distant. The message was clear: humanity had arrived, and they weren't asking for permission to take their place in the galaxy, they were demanding it. The Intrepid had not just entered the sector, it had changed everything. As the Intrepid wreaked havoc on the Korath fleet, Captain Alexander Drake stood at the center of the storm, his focus unshaken by the chaos unfolding before him. The hum of the ship's engines, the rhythmic pulse of the weapon systems, the distant explosions, it was all part of the mission. Humanity's place in the galaxy was no longer a question of whether they could compete, but of whether any other civilization could survive their ascendancy. The Korath fleet, once a formidable force known for their psychic dominance, was now reeling from the Intrepid's relentless assault. Their psychic attempts to break through the human defenses had failed miserably, their telepathic probes lost to the Intrepid's sophisticated mental shielding. The collective, often calm and collected in the face of warfare, was now in disarray. Their ships were disabled one by one, their communication networks in chaos as the Intrepid's advanced electronic warfare systems jammed their transmissions. Drake, as usual, remained calm, calculating every move with cold precision. His eyes flicked from one tactical readout to another, taking in the damage reports, the status of each weapon system, and the positioning of the remaining enemy ships. The Korath were retreating, but it was clear they had no intention of giving up entirely. This engagement was only the first in what would undoubtedly be a series of tests for humanity. The galaxy had never seen anything like the Intrepid, and it was becoming increasingly clear that the rest of the galaxy would need time to adjust to this new power. All Korath ships disabled, Captain, Lieutenant Ramirez reported, her voice filled with both awe and concern. They're signaling for a ceasefire. It's not a surrender, but they're asking for a temporary pause in hostilities. Grant them the pause, Drake ordered. His voice was steady but laced with a quiet intensity. We'll give them a moment to reconsider their position. The communications officer, Lieutenant Commander Jensen, worked swiftly to open the comms with the Korath fleet. A few moments passed before a face appeared on the screen, a tall, slender figure with luminous skin and radiant, mind-linked eyes. The Korath were an imposing species, their very presence exuding an otherworldly intelligence, but now, their demeanor was noticeably less certain. This is High Synod Regent Jlur of the Korath Collective, the Korath leader said, his voice rich with a deep, resonating telepathic undertone. We request a temporary ceasefire. Your actions are unexpected, but we are not without reason. We wish to discuss terms of peaceful coexistence. Captain Drake regarded Jlur with an unblinking gaze. The Korath, despite their psychic prowess and their vast collective knowledge, had underestimated humanity's resolve, and now they were paying the price. You've attacked human settlements before, Drake said bluntly, not bothering with pleasantries. What assurance do I have that this is not just another trick? That you won't strike again as soon as we lower our guard? Jlur seemed to hesitate. We are not fools, Captain. The collective recognizes the strength of your military, and we would be wise to consider the consequences of further aggression. However, our species is vast, and our reach is far. We did not seek this conflict, but if you insist on further action— No, Drake interrupted. We are not interested in war unless it's necessary. But make no mistake, we will defend ourselves and our people. You wanted to test our resolve, and now you've got your answer. If you want peace, you'll have to earn it. Jlur's expression remained unreadable, but it was clear that humanity's stance had taken the Korath by surprise. The psychic link between them, which had once allowed them to dominate conversations with their wisdom and intellect, now felt less imposing in the face of human determination. The Korath Collective was not one to admit vulnerability easily, but they had just encountered a species that would never be cowed. We will consider your offer, Jlur said, bowing his head in a rare gesture of humility. Expect a formal delegation within the week. May we avoid further conflict. Drake's eyes narrowed, but he didn't respond immediately. His thoughts were already shifting to the next stage. The Intrepid had made its point, but now the true test would be in dealing with the aftermath. The galaxy would be watching. Not just the Korath, but every species that had witnessed this show of strength. Understood, Drake finally said. We'll await your delegation. But know this: humanity doesn't make deals with those who aim to destroy us. We protect our own. And if you want to survive in this galaxy, you will remember that. The screen flickered, and the Coriath Regent's image disappeared. Silence fell over the bridge, the tension palpable. Continue monitoring the Coriath fleet, Drake ordered. Let them think on our offer. But prepare for anything. We're not letting our guard down. As the communication link closed, Drake turned to Lieutenant Commander Jensen. Send out a warning to the other fleets in the sector. Let them know the Intrepid has entered the sector to ensure humanity's interests are respected. We won't tolerate any more aggression. Aye, Captain, Jensen replied. Message is being broadcasted to all fleets within a 30 light-year radius. Drake then looked out toward the stars. The Intrepid's arrival in this sector was more than a military maneuver, it was a statement. Humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would either adapt or be forced to submit. The old powers had thrived on their established hierarchies, their calculated politics, and their age-old treaties. But humanity was something different. Their rise wasn't about slowly climbing up the ranks, it was about taking control, reshaping the galaxy's future in their image. Diplomacy was a tool, but power would always be their ultimate leverage. Drake's thoughts were interrupted by a new transmission, one that arrived swiftly, bypassing the standard channels. It was from the Vedral Consortium. Captain Drake, the message began, the smooth, almost melodic voice of Vedral Ambassador Thor ringing in his ears. We have been monitoring your actions with great interest. The Consortium recognizes your power and seeks a mutually beneficial relationship. We propose an immediate meeting to discuss trade and other matters of galactic importance. Drake's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. The Vedral were opportunists, always ready to strike deals, and he had no intention of letting them use humanity's strength for their own gain. Your message has been received, he replied coolly. But know this, Ambassador Thor, humanity doesn't negotiate out of fear. We make deals out of mutual respect. Should the Consortium wish to speak, they will do so on our terms, or not at all. The transmission flickered out. Drake's resolve was clear. Humanity was no longer a species that begged for a seat at the galactic table, they would take one. The Intrepid had marked the beginning of a new era, one where humanity was no longer a side player, but a dominant force shaping the course of history. Across the galaxy, as the news of the Intrepid's actions spread, fear began to settle in. The old powers, the civilizations that had reigned supreme for millennia, suddenly found themselves questioning the security of their thrones. No longer could they operate under the assumption that humanity was an unknown quantity, a species with limited reach. The Intrepid was a clear message: humanity was here to stay. Yet, even as humanity's influence grew, new threats were beginning to surface, their eyes now trained on the Intrepid and the potential for its unprecedented power. The galaxy was changing, and no one knew what the future held, but one thing was certain: humanity would have a seat at the table, whether the galaxy was ready for it or not. The sector remained tense, the reverberations of the Intrepid's arrival felt far beyond the immediate vicinity. Throughout the galaxy, civilizations were reevaluating their strategies, policies, and alliances in light of humanity's newfound dominance. To some, the human war vessel was a clear warning. To others, it was an invitation to test humanity's resolve, to challenge them and see how far they would go. But as the days turned into weeks, one thing became increasingly clear: humanity wasn't interested in merely surviving in the galaxy, they were determined to thrive, to rule, to reshape the balance of power in ways no one had anticipated. While Captain Drake remained aboard the Intrepid, overseeing the ship's mission, his reputation grew beyond the ship itself. A leader, a strategist, and a symbol of humanity's fierce independence, he became the figurehead of a new era. The rest of the galaxy had to come to terms with this emerging power, one that had proven itself more than capable of taking what it wanted, but at the same time, willing to engage diplomatically if the terms were right. Humanity was unpredictable in its strength, and that was perhaps its greatest weapon. The Koreath Collective, still nursing the wounds of their defeat, sent their representatives to the negotiating table. Their fleet, though still operational, had been utterly outclassed by the Intrepid, and they were now fully aware of humanity's military superiority. The meeting was set to take place on neutral ground, at a station constructed by the Vedral Consortium, known for its impartiality in galactic disputes. The location was strategically chosen, a neutral location that held no real significance to any of the warring factions, but would allow for one of the most pivotal discussions in galactic history. As Drake prepared to depart the Intrepid for the negotiation station, he found himself alone in his quarters for the first time in weeks. The silent hum of the ship and the occasional whir of systems running their diagnostics filled the air. The solitude gave him a moment to reflect on the journey humanity had embarked on. In just a few short decades, they had gone from an isolated, barely noticed species to a force that commanded attention, respect, and, in some cases, fear. His thoughts were interrupted by the sharp chime of the comm system. A message, an urgent one, flashed across his desk. Captain Drake, the voice on the other end was familiar. It was Lieutenant Ramirez. We've just intercepted a transmission from the Vedral Consortium. There's a shift in the terms of the negotiations. They're offering something unconventional. Drake's brow furrowed. Go on. They're proposing a trade agreement of sorts, Ramirez continued, her voice steady but with an edge of uncertainty. But it involves more than just resources. They're offering an alliance, a full partnership, in exchange for a demonstration of humanity's military strength. They want to see us in action up close and personal before they'll finalize anything. Drake sighed. Of course, the Vedral would test humanity in this way. They'd been waiting for the right moment to strike an advantageous deal, but their cautious approach using trade as a lure was typical of them. Still, this wasn't an ordinary diplomatic negotiation. The Vedral were known for their cunning, and it was clear that they wanted to gauge humanity's full capacity before committing to anything too binding. I'll speak with the Council, Drake said. This sounds like more than just a trade negotiation. It feels like a challenge. A calculated risk. We need to be prepared for anything. The Vedral Consortium, once humanity's best hope for a peaceful expansion into the galaxy, now appeared as another force to be reckoned with. They were no longer seen as allies, but as players in a much larger game, one in which the rules were still being written, and humanity was determined to make its mark. The negotiation station was a marvel of neutral architecture, part combat-hardened fortress, part diplomatic meeting hall. The walls were lined with reinforced shielding, the entire structure designed to withstand the most intense battles. This was no place for subtlety, but the Vedral, with their sophisticated technological expertise, had designed it with purpose, to contain the myriad of species in one space while ensuring that any heated disputes could be swiftly contained. It was a testament to their desire for control, as much as it was a neutral ground for talks. As Drake's shuttle approached the station, the tension in the air was palpable. The ship was flanked by a small escort of human warships, their advanced weaponry at the ready in case the negotiations took an unexpected turn. Despite the calm demeanor Drake projected, he knew that peace, however fleeting, was never guaranteed. The Koreath, the Vedral, and the Orthians, each of these species had their own agendas, their own reasons for wanting to engage with humanity. But the one thing they all had in common was that they didn't understand the full extent of what humanity could do. They still underestimated the drive and determination that pulsed through every human, from the lowliest grunt to the highest commander. As Drake stepped onto the station, flanked by his most trusted officers, the representatives from the Koreath Collective were already there, awaiting the arrival of the human delegation. The Koreath leader, Regent Jlur, stood tall and regal, but his demeanor had shifted since their last encounter. No longer was he the smug diplomat attempting to assert his psychic superiority. Now, he appeared more cautious, almost humble in his posture. Beside him were two of his closest advisors, their expressions unreadable, their minds carefully guarded. The air was thick with anticipation as Drake approached the table where the negotiations were to be held. The Vedral ambassador, Thor, was already there, waiting with a serene smile plastered on his face. His eyes narrowed as Drake took a seat, his posture perfect, his presence commanding. The human leader didn't engage in the usual pleasantries, he simply nodded and waited for the conversation to begin. "Captain Drake," Thor began, his voice smooth and practiced. "It is an honor to finally meet you face to face. I trust your journey was smooth?" Drake didn't respond immediately, his eyes scanning the room, studying the other species present. The Korath had taken up a defensive position at the far side of the table, clearly still recovering from their humiliation at the hands of the Intrepid. The Vedril were trying to play the part of the diplomats, but their true motives were transparent. "Let's cut the pleasantries, Ambassador," Drake said, his voice cutting through the veneer of civility. "You didn't bring me here just to talk about trade, did you? You want to see us in action. You want to test our strength. You want to know if we're worthy of being your partners." Thor's smile never wavered, though there was a glint of amusement in his eyes. "You're astute, Captain. Yes, we seek a demonstration. But this is not just about power. It's about understanding. We need to know if humanity is capable of the kind of unity and control necessary for a long-term alliance. We need to see if your military might is just the product of your current technology or if it is an enduring force." Jler, still cautious, nodded in agreement. "Your military strength is formidable, Captain Drake. But strength alone does not guarantee a place at the table. The galaxy has had its share of violent empires. What we need to know is whether humanity is capable of governance of leadership without chaos." Drake's gaze shifted between the two representatives, the weight of their words hanging in the air. They weren't wrong. The galaxy had seen its share of brutal empires, those who had tried to expand by sheer force of will, only to crumble under the weight of their own arrogance. Humanity was still young in galactic terms. The idea that they might build something lasting, something more than just an empire of conquest, was an open question. "We'll demonstrate our capabilities," Drake said, his voice firm. "But let me be clear, we are not here to be tested. We're here to ensure our survival. If you want to partner with humanity, you'll do so on our terms. We'll offer you strength and stability, but we will not be anyone's puppet." The tension in the room rose as the reality of what Drake was saying began to sink in. The galaxy was at a turning point, and the Intrepid had made it clear, humanity was not just a rising power, it was a force that demanded respect. The next few hours would set the course for the future of the galaxy, and humanity's place in it.